I really personally consider, even though I've never practiced law with him, I've just known him mainly as a judge, although I think I knew him when he was at Davis, Graham, and Stubbs. Judge Alan Loeb, who is our chief judge of the Court of Appeals, I think is a premier mentor. And he videoed a short mentoring story for us. We were going to play it, but with all the things that we've been going on with the technology, I decided I'd not mess with video and audio. So he's going to perform it live for you. But Chief Judge Loeb did practice law with Davis, Graham, and Stubbs for a long time. And then in 2003, he was appointed to the Court of Appeals, and then he became the chief judge. But his most important thing is he mentored kids in that firm and still mentors his clerks on his court. So I introduce to you Chief Judge Alan Loeb.
Thank you, John, and welcome to all of you. And let me repeat what Chief Justice Rice said last night. We're really welcome to the Ralph Carr Center, and I hope that many of you who are not from Colorado have gotten a chance to kind of take a tour of the whole building. We are so proud of it. We pinch ourselves every day that we come into work. And so we're delighted that you're here, and welcome. So I think John didn't play the video today because he knows that every time he does it, I keep asking him for my royalty, and he hasn't paid me yet. But before I introduce Dean Schwartz, I just want to take a couple of minutes and tell you kind of my favorite personal mentoring story. So I was an attorney at Davis, Graham, and Stubbs for 32 years, one of Denver's large law firms. I started right out of law school. And I was lucky to have two very senior partners who mentored me in the nuts and bolts of practicing law. But the person that I think of most as my most important mentor was somebody else. It was the Davis of Davis, Graham, and Stubbs, Dick Davis, who was the senior partner. Dick was a legend in the Colorado Bar. He was the past president of the Colorado Bar Association, past president of the Denver Bar Association, was on the board of dozens of both for-profit and non-for-profit entities, was a real force in not just the Denver legal community, but the Denver and Colorado communities as a whole. So I started in the day after Labor Day in 1971. And I'd been at the firm about 2 weeks. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was working on something, I don't know what it was, and Dick Davis stuck his head in my office. And he said, "Can I give you a ride home?" So here I am, a first-year associate, knowing I've got a deadline on whatever I'm working on, and I've got this senior partner saying, "Can I give you a ride home?" And I didn't really have to flip a coin. When the senior partner says, "Can I give you a ride home?" you go. So I dropped what I was working on, and Dick and I went out to his car. He had a little two-seater light blue Mercedes. I can remember it to this day. And I was living in a one-bedroom apartment, maybe 15 minutes from downtown Denver. And that began a 2-year relationship where probably twice a week, Dick would offer to give me a ride home in his little car, and we would just talk. In the entire time that I worked at Davis Graham, and I became Dick's partner after a while, and so we had many years together, I never worked with him for 5 minutes on a legal matter. But those rides home and our conversations meant more to me in terms of my growth as a lawyer than any kind of technical training anybody could have given me. Because what we talked about was the importance of a lawyer being active in the community, the importance of a lawyer learning his or her clients' businesses, the importance of a lawyer doing nonprofit work or working in bar association activities, the importance of civility and professionalism. Dick talked to me about all those things on all those rides home. He wanted to know what I was doing in the community, the kinds of things that I was interested in. That had such an enduring and long-standing impact on me and how I wanted to become a lawyer, and the importance of mentoring and how I wanted to treat younger lawyers who worked for me, that I've never forgotten it to this day. That was the little video clip that I made for for John, and now you've got a second video. So I thought you would all be interested in that. But now to the most important point. Let me introduce to you Dean Michael Hunter from the University of Arkansas Law School, the Bowen School of Law. When I met the dean last night, he said, look, just get up and tell him my name, and that's good enough. But I would be doing a disservice not only to him, but to you, not to really highlight a little bit some of his background, because you're in to hear an amazing speaker this afternoon. You're very lucky that he is here. So Dean Schwartz is the dean at the University of Arkansas Law School at Little Rock. He is, and to put it mildly, a national leader in legal education reform. He's authored 10 books, 7 law review papers, 3 book chapters, 8 shorter works on that subject. One of his books includes a book that was published by the Harvard University Press called What the Best Law Teachers Do, and I'll come back to that in a minute. He's made literally hundreds of presentations on teaching. He's given keynote speeches at national and international conferences, literally all over the world. And his new project, and the one that he's going to talk to you about today, is so interesting because it follows from the book he wrote on what the best law teachers do. And it's a research project, an ongoing project, titled What the Best Law Mentors Do. And ultimately, it also will be published in the Harvard University Press. So I introduce to you, and we're happy to have him here, Dean Schwartz.
Thank you, Joe. I just want to say I'm thrilled to be here. I can't really say that I feel like I am an expert on mentoring. I want to become more expert on mentoring. And so what I'm going to give you is a very early snapshot of sort of where we are in our project and some of the things where I think where we're headed, invite you to contribute to the discussion, and hopefully deliver some value in terms of thinking about how you train mentors to be really effective as mentors. I'm certainly not qualified to write, 101 practical techniques. I don't feel qualified at all, so I'm very humbled by having this at the podium with me so I can know where I'm not yet at. I also want to share with you the picture that you're seeing. That's Little Rock, not the picture in the corner, but the part in the back. If you look at this picture just right, it looks like Little Rock's a nice sized city. That really is the downtown of Little Rock. So, they took it from the perfect angle. I do really love it in Little Rock. It's not a criticism of the city. It means that I never have traffic ever in any day of my life. They think it's traffic when you get to a stoplight and there's 2 cars in front of you. I want to start off by explaining the crazy picture in the bottom corner. It sort of reminds me to tell you why I became interested in mentoring. As the judge suggested, I am very interested in legal education changing in lots of ways. So just by way of example, we are now one of 5 law schools that have a required mentoring program for each of our law students, 11 hours of shadowing, 5 hours of pro bono. They have to create a career plan and get feedback on it from their practitioner mentor. They have to write a resume, get feedback on that from their mentor. They have to reflect on their mentoring process as it's happening as part of a required course in our curriculum. And that's something we created when I arrived. That was basically the first thing I created as a new dean at the law school. And I'm very passionate about it. But part of what has irked me forever about legal education is why I'm interested in mentoring. So what's irked me about legal education is law professors saying, well, we have to be mean to our students because that's what they're going to get in practice. This is the image that law professors have in mind when they think about what it's like to be working under someone's supervision in the legal profession. And that always really ticked me off. Because I'm sure that guy exists in some places in the profession, but that's not where we want to aspire. That's not the kind of lawyers we want to be producing. Actually, this is the kind of mentor this is actually a woman named Susan Keller. She's now associate dean of my former law school. She was my mentor as a new law professor. She's an unbelievably brilliant person. And I think that's telling in some ways because even in our short work on the mentoring study, one of the things we've heard so far over and over again from the mentees is that their mentors are also great lawyers, that's a factor that helps them and inspires them. So she is this unbelievably brilliant scholar. You know, law professors, they feel like, wow, we've done something really big. We wrote an article and it has 1 or 2 new ideas in it. Hers have like 16 to 30. She got a perfect score on her LSAT, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law School. And yet, when she was mentoring me to be a scholar, she would show me her work and act like my feedback mattered. And take it seriously and like make changes based on the feedback that I was giving her. And just her asking kind of made me think, oh wow, maybe I can do this. If I can give her advice, maybe I can do this. And so I really just sort of want that to be our image of what a mentor looks like. I want to explain one other thing. So because I write about teaching and learning, I'm sort of a geek about this stuff. So what you have in front of you is labeled a note-taking guide. They compared 3 groups of learners. One group of learners were given the professor's lecture notes for a session. One group was given nothing at all. And one group of learners was given a note-taking scaffold. Headings with space to write in as they took notes. And then they test them immediately afterwards and then 2 weeks later to see if they had retained the key points from the class session. And the students who were given the professor's lecture notes and the students who were given nothing at all performed about the same on both the initial test and the 2 week later test. But the students who were given a note-taking guide into which they took notes remembered more, remembered it better, and did so even 2 weeks later. And when you sort of look at the literature on learning, this should actually make a lot of sense because human beings organize information in their brains in organized structures, kind of like a note-taking guide might be organized. And so the fact that the other part is that if you have something like this, you're kind of like looking, what do I write in between the lines, right? And so you're searching your brain of what to fill in. And so that's why whenever I do a talk, I use a note-taking guide because I figure that might help you retain a few more of the things that I want to suggest to you. All right, this is where we're headed. You can see that on the top of the page, I have the goals of the session. I'm not going to read them to you. I completely believe in your reading skills. I'll give you a moment to look at them. So I'm going to talk a little bit and actually ask you to think a little bit about the challenges that you think exist to effective mentoring. I'm going to ask you to engage with our sort of very tentative definition of exceptional mentoring results. And so let me explain what I mean by that is that when we did the study of the best law teachers, one of the things we did, we have a whole chapter where basically we did a collaborative definition of what exceptional teaching results were. Because we were looking at people, at law teachers who had an extraordinary long-term effect long after the students graduated. We weren't looking for kind of the great show persons who were incredibly funny and dazzling, and you think, wow, I'd like to watch this person's comedy act, but rather people who had a long-term significant impact on their students that changed their students' lives. And that's what we're looking for as well in our mentoring study. So I'm going to ask you to kind of engage what that might look like. I'm going to actually ask you to think about what you know already about great mentors. I'll tell you a little bit about our studies, and then I'll launch you into the training planning session that we have coming up at the end of my hour with you. All right. So about middle of the page, what I'd like you to do is just take a moment and write about what frustrates you about your mentoring experiences, either as an observer of others mentoring, as a mentee, or even as a mentor. And I'll give you like a minute to do that. Thank you. So let me just say that I can't help but have occasional sort of teaching and learning moments. And so in this instance, the writing thing. So I've been having students do writing in my class for the last 15 years. I teach contracts and remedies when I'm not doing the crazy deaning thing. And one day, a woman student of mine had a childcare issue, and so she brought her 10-year-old son to class. And he sat there. He was incredibly well behaved. There was a moment, though, where I asked my students to write. And all of a sudden I hear this soft little voice, "Mommy, writing is learning." I've never enjoyed a 10-year-old more, except maybe my daughters. Anyone willing to share what drives you most crazy in the mentoring relationship? Thank you.
One off, do the mandatory meeting. I buy him a cup of coffee. We talk about law school, give some basic advice, and then they just disappear. And I know, 1L year is extremely stressful and frustrating and whatnot, but I specifically told them, I will give you outlines, I will help you with your exams, like just everything, I can do to help. All they have to do is reach out. So my biggest frustration is trying to continue on engagement and have people do a little bit more than just the minimum, especially when they have all sorts of conflicting responsibilities.
Yes, and I would imagine that those who are running mentoring programs, especially if they're mandatory mentoring programs, share your concern about people sort of checking the box without actually genuinely engaging. How about another concern? All the way in the back. Thank you.
Lack of empathy, which probably describes a lot of things with the profession. But especially mentors acting like they have forgotten what it's like to be a law student or a junior attorney.
Yes, it's a really interesting thing because the same problem we have with law professors, forgetting what it's like to be learning something new until we ask them to use a piece of technology in their work. And then they feel lots of empathy for their own experience of learning something new. All the way at the end?
Yes, lawyers who constantly say, I did this, I did that. It's all about, in fact, me telling more stories, but never really relating and engaging with their mentee.
I just want you to know that I did not pay him to offer that particular insight. One of the things I've already heard from mentees about their nominated mentors is that when their mentors tell stories, they're not the hero of their stories. And actually, that's also true of the best law teachers that we studied. That their stories are, if I had only learned what I'm trying to share with you now, I wouldn't have made this really stupid mistake. Or here's something some other person did that I so admire and which I had chosen to do. So I think that's a great insight, and thank you. All the way in the back, thank you.
Somewhat similar, but I've seen mentors who thought that meant explaining what the mentee needs to do to be like them. I need to have so many arbitrations, I need to do this, I need to do that, and so that I can look like and be like this mentor, rather than taking the time to figure out how do you become, the best lawyer with your own stuff.
Yes, to sort of engage the mentees where they are and what their aspirations are. Thank you.
We have a mandatory program through the Bar Association, so it's slightly different than some of the others, but one of the frustrations that I have and some of our lawyers have is that it feels like another year of school with deadlines and reports and stuff instead of a professional development opportunity. And how to get them to see it as that and one-on-one CLE instead of they're putting you through another year of school.
Yes, that really is a really tricky one for including for our mandatory program at the law school, that getting the students to sort of see that this is really a great opportunity for them and not just more imposition. Over here?
I think mine branches off of that. My most frustrating experience of the last few years of mentoring is when I get a table for the firm and invite half the table to be the mentees, and then a professor assigns a huge assignment that's due the next morning, and I have, every other seat empty. It's really, it sets me back.
Yes, and so you're gonna gather this about me as we talk this afternoon, but I'm very opinionated on legal education things. That strikes me as an area where law professors could be more effective in training law students to engage in effective time management. My own experience of practice is that I needed to be ahead on stuff because something might come up.
Well, it does actually make me feel like I'm back in law school, subject to the professor's.
Yes. Thank you.
When a mentor or mentee, when their matchup doesn't work, that they don't come to you if you're running a program soon enough, and you find out long after you could have helped them either navigate that relationship or find a new one of his.
Thank you. I see a lot of nodding heads in response to that one. Let's take maybe one or two more. Thank you.
When I have a mentor who decides that they're not going to follow our curriculum because they have something better to do, that they want to do their own thing.
Yes, that is very interesting. And to kind of piggyback on the thing the other person said, it may not actually even be what the mentee wants either, or that the mentee might think is beneficial. It's just the mentor's sense of things. So what our discussion suggests to me is the critical role of mentor training. And one of the things I hope we can contribute is a tool for mentor training to kind of supplement the incredible resource that already exists and is sitting here on the podium as a tool for helping mentors to become more effective. And perhaps the reason we're doing that sort of collaborative training, brainstorming, is to kind of get some ideas that you could take back and use in your own mentor training. All right. So I am going to give you a little sense of our sort of tentative thoughts about what are exceptional mentoring results, but I really want to ask you for your input as well, because we were sort of making this up. So I have it up on my phone. I apologize for that. So what we've come up with, and it's from the website that's mentioned in the materials for the program today. But basically, we think of exceptional mentoring as producing exceptional results. In other words, professional development and personal development. And so we've kind of disaggregated the two of them. In the professional category, in our minds, exceptional mentoring results include developing specific law practice skills, acquiring professional judgment, enhancing professional relationships and interactions depending on your practice area, and understanding and adhering to ethical and professionalism norms. So that's sort of on the professional development. On the personal development, it sort of stems from the fact that a large percentage of our recent law school graduates, young lawyers, are somewhere in that period between being kind of fully fledged and being still recent graduates of education. And so they're in that developmental process. So we included understanding oneself, your history, your emotions, motivations, and abilities, gaining confidence, skill, and intrinsic motivation to grow beyond your own imagination of what you can be, developing a sense of responsibility to yourself and others. If you sort of think about some of the things we've heard in the lunchtime session about that sense of all the speakers' belief that they owed something beyond themselves. That was really a striking moment for me listening to each of you. Enhance the ability to understand others' emotions and to exercise compassion, and developing professional identity. So that's sort of our like rough, we're kind of making this up, but I'd be really interested what you think we should be thinking about in terms of what does it mean to produce exceptional mentoring results? What does that look like? Thank you.
Question for you. These are all, you were describing fairly basic developmental characteristics and objectives of what a mentor would do. Does that mean your study isn't looking at the career advancing piece of it, the advocacy, the stuff we're starting to talk about as sponsorship, but is really, can be seen as more of a champion for the mentor?
So I think what you're assuming is that we've made a conscious choice, and I can't take credit for that we've done. When I've looked at our tentative nominations of mentors and what people are saying about those people, there's definitely a career advancement component. Let me share with you a couple of comments that I think go to your question. This is talking about a partner in a mid-sized firm. Her goal is to build us up, watch us thrive, and unleash us on the world to give our best for those we serve. So very much this sort of career advancement kind of story. There's a really good one. I just want to see if I can find it. I'll have to just describe it because I'm not sort of seeing it in my notes today. A really powerful story from a lawyer of color in a really, really large firm who said that, and her mentor was a white male, and what she described is the degree to which, like, he would bring her to meetings and cite what she had contributed to the process in terms of preparing for that meeting and how she was a valuable team member, not by creating something that she hadn't contributed, but rather just acknowledging and making sure that everyone in the room knew what it is that she had brought to the table. And so that when she sort of was ready to go out on her own, because that really was her goal in the long run, she felt like she already had an established reputation. So this is why this is a tentative definition. The same thing we did with the best law teachers is that we are asking to build up that definition. So we are absolutely open to the idea that it also includes that sort of career scaffolding that you're describing. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it even goes beyond that. I mean, we're talking now about actually pushing.
Yes.
So it's the sort of thing that wouldn't necessarily be covered at all by what you're describing.
Yes, and some of it is, some of it isn't. I really don't think we've yet made a decision to, consciously cut it off at some spot. Yes.
I'm intrigued by the difference of what you consider exceptional results for mentoring that's an in-firm mentoring program versus a bar program, because it seems to me that if it's in your firm, one of your goals is clearly to have that lawyer be the best practitioner, the best moneymaker, the best whatever, because that's what your firm wants. Whereas if it's a state bar or a county bar, it's more maybe about the collegiality. I mean, professionalism is important, and their ability to do a good job for clients is obviously critical both ways. But if it's an association, you're really looking at the collegiality and keeping your bar as a whole a good place to work. So I'm intrigued by how you differentiate.
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting because one of the people who was nominated for our study is a mentor in New Hampshire. And I read this incredible story of through some sort of, I think, mediated kind of mentoring program. So he emailed like a lawyer, said, I'm willing to talk to people, and said, hey, I'm drafting my first trust, and I'm really worried about it. And he probably lived like an hour away from this lawyer. And the lawyer, and I really do think it's more of the kind of mentoring program you're describing, said, why don't you come down to my office? So the guy came down to the office, spent a day with the lawyer, and they've now have this like lifelong mentoring relationship. And so I think there's a blurring of the lines. I'm not sure where the edge of the line is, because I do sort of think that in our ideal world, we're sort of dealing with the whole person, and the more that we sort of produce people who are fully sort of engaged, effective practitioners, the more the whole profession is better off. And certainly right now our percentage of nominees is more heavily tilted actually an extraordinarily large number of people who are in legal aid positions, and very well with U.S. attorneys and some state attorney general's offices. And fewer from firms, but certainly we probably have a half dozen or so from firms too. The example I gave was just an example from one. There's a question way over here.
Oh, yes. So I guess how I'm seeing it in particular is mentorship in every context, not just the legal context, is a social prevention program, right? Because you're preventing potentially disbarment, you're preventing potentially somebody leaving the practice, and it's going to change by each individual organization's need. And I also see it as mentorship actually changes mentees and mentors, actually mentors to that extent, their understanding, beliefs, attitudes, experiences about whatever it is that you're trying to change. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to depend on, like Kathy was saying, the individual program, but I think it's all based on that same idea of change theory.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right, and I also think it depends to the extent that, to echo a comment that was made earlier, it also depends on what the mentee is hoping to get from the mentoring relationship. That's going to have a huge impact on where things go, because I think if the mentee doesn't feel like the relationship's addressing why they're in that relationship, the goals of the mentoring program are not going to be achieved, because the mentor will check out. Yeah. The mentee will check out.
I would also say that it's about changing actually the mentor's beliefs and attitudes and experiences, right? And that's actually where the root of the change happens, is because if you, and I think it goes back to the challenges, right? So we find a lot of challenges, but that's because we're not actually training or orienting or giving the coaching skills or changing the mentor's idea about what mentorship is.
Yes, I think, and that's exactly, I think you and I are completely aligned on this one. I want to turn now to what you think about mentoring. So if you look now on page 2 of your note-taking guide, I'd like you to identify the best mentor you've ever experienced. And I'd like you to describe what made that mentor so great. It doesn't have to be someone who personally mentored you. It could be someone whose mentoring you witnessed. But I'd like you to sort of identify a really concrete, specific person and write about what made that person so extraordinary as a mentor. All right, thank you. So here's what I'd like you to do now. Turn to a person sitting next to you and reach consensus on at least one and ideally 2 qualities that your best mentors had in common. I'm going to ask you to report out. So now you know that I'm a thrill seeker because I'm willing to let a whole bunch of lawyers talk and pretend I can recapture their attention. What I'd like to do is sort of have one person from at least a good number of the pairs share what your great mentors had in common. But I really want to hear from people who haven't yet spoken, if that's possible. Thank you.
My best mentor saw mentoring as a professional responsibility. It was something she had to do. Everyone had to do. And then the other quality that we saw was listening more than talking.
I apologize for my horrible writing. And actually listening skills were ones that I think just about every single person that has nominated someone for our study has mentioned so far that these people are great listeners. So that's an interesting one. What else? Thank you.
We had a couple that were shared. The first one was one-on-one engagement where the mentor actually sought the mentee's advice on legal issues and let them have a voice. And like kind of the banter back and forth on what to do.
It sort of is an echo of that genius double Harvard person acting like I could do anything useful in reading her scholarship.
And the second thing we said is when that mentor publicly acknowledged something that we did, and even years later, being a champion of our success.
And that's a great example. One of the things that's really interesting to me is the degree to which the qualities of great mentors overlaps with great teachers. And so, like one person we studied for the Best Law Teacher book, a woman named Heather Gerken, who's a professor at Yale, she, whenever a student says something really smart, for the rest of the class session, she refers to it as the Reardon point. Remember back to that point that Ms. Reardon made and attributes it, and she might say something like, we should write a paper about that together. And here she is, she's this amazing, brilliant law professor who's saying, yeah, we need to write together about that. And so I do think that there's a great overlap in that way in really both of the public acknowledgement and also treating the mentee like they come to the table with something. One of the people that has nominated somebody mentioned that his mentor recognized the fact that he came to the practice as a second career. And so his mentor treated that as being a source of expertise and knowledge and wisdom that person can bring to the table. I think that's a great example of that same principle. Thank you. Oh, you have talked, but I'll let you go again. No, that's fine.
I just wanted to follow up on that point with just a very short story of my own daughter who came out of law school in 2013, Wisconsin, by the way. And she worked for a firm. Stand up. He wants me to stand up. She worked for, it speaks to people who are in senior positions and should be good mentors. It was a small firm, but who don't recognize context. She was the first ever new attorney they had ever hired, fresh out of law school. And so that created all sorts of issues in terms of the way that that firm normally operated. So there was no recognition of the need for some training, and that happens a lot, I know, but just no recognition that there are certain things that she just couldn't know because she had never been exposed. Those kinds of things. So not understanding context is huge.
And it is. And understanding context is sort of the flip side of that. Thank you, sir.
Our common quality was an investment of time without any expectation of compensation or financial gain, going beyond what was expected in a regular professional setting, where the younger person, the mentee or whatnot, clearly recognizes that this person is really doing them a great favor, kind of thing.
Yes, it's almost sort of analogous to when people talk about servant leadership, that it's about being of service to the mentee. What else? Thank you.
Michelle and I had two common qualities. One, honesty. So praise when it was warranted, and then always honest, constructive criticism when it was warranted as well.
Can I give you an example of that before you get to the second one? I have a really good one. So this is a guy who described his mentor as the most kind, gentle mentor ever, and yet also said, and this is someone who worked for the Department of Justice, that the person told him, stop interrupting people. So also gave honest, candid feedback, and even more intriguing, you represent the United States. Speak with more confidence. And so you sort of think about that. It isn't to be a good mentor that if you sort of think about great teachers, it's not that you have to always say what people want to hear. You just have to have the relationship that they can hear both kinds of feedback. That's a great one. I'll write candor. Will you live with that? Yes. And the second one, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, that's learn to stop interrupting.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that was beautiful.
I don't get to tell my own lot being anything like that. No, the other one was finding outside resources and introducing the mentee to those resources that can help them.
So I'm going to write connect to outside resources.
Thank you. He's going to get me a new page because my deep knee bends don't seem to be going very well. In the back, thank you. Let's get a couple more.
Being very deliberate and consistent in following the plan.
Thank you. Can you give me an example of that?
Just that there was a plan and that it was clearly communicated by the mentor to the mentee. It was followed. Not only was the plan conveyed to the mentee, but and this is both the mentors that we talked about were just very consistent in following it. Not just consistent in saying this is the plan, we're going to follow it, but on a regular basis, they were doing what the plan required, when it required it. The mentee was aware that this was the plan, that there were consequences for not doing what their part of the bargain was. So they just were really good at conveying that this is important and then sticking to it and following through.
Yeah. Does anyone else feel like you're hearing an echo of parenting in there somewhere? I feel like I'm hearing a bit of an echo of that all the way over here. Ma'am?
We both agreed on availability and trust.
And I think that it's worth thinking for a moment about trust. Could you specify, so when you say trust, you mean trust that the mentor...
Trust between the mentor and the mentee relationship, that they both have towards each other. If the mentee says he or she's going to perform something, the mentor can trust that yes, and this vice versa.
Yeah, that the mentor really is there, not, for example, to evaluate the mentee in some way if they're in a practice together, but really to support and advocate and promote the mentee. Thank you.
Leading by example, not necessarily in what they say, but what they do. Bar involvement, pro bono involvement. A mentor can tell a mentee to do those things, but if they don't do them themselves, it's kind of hollow words.
I absolutely love that, because that's something we heard over and over again, is that the mentors really are role models for the mentees. So mentees who said, I volunteered to be on the board of my first nonprofit because I saw that my mentor was on the board of a nonprofit. So I think that role modeling thing is really a huge piece of it. Sir?
It goes with listening, but we both felt, the mentor showing a genuine interest in the needs of the mentee and what they're interested in doing.
Yes, we sort of think of client-centered lawyering. This is mentee-centered mentoring. Any others that you'd really regret if we didn't include? Yes, ma'am.
I only bring this up because we talked about the whole diversity thing. And so when I spoke with my partner, I talked about candor. But I think it goes a little bit deeper, and it has to be candor across racial lines. One of my mentors is a white woman, and she basically was so candid with me. She told me that they're picking you for this committee because they're taking you for this committee because they feel like they have to take you because you're black. So what I'm letting you know what they're thinking. So this is what I need you need to do. You need to show, you need to prove it. And that created an amazing bond between me and this woman, because automatically I knew that I could trust her and that she had my best interest.
And that really resonates for me, because one of the things that I found about law professors who are the most successful law professors is they're not afraid to bring up race. They don't hide from it. They don't pretend it's not there in the room. They acknowledge it. They may even acknowledge they're feeling a little uncomfortable about it. So if you sort of think about, if you're a crim pro professor and you're teaching, a lot of the crim pro textbook cases involve black men. And if you pretend that's not there, you're just telling a big lie. And so in the same way your mentor did that, I think that is a characteristic that people sort of are authentic in that way. And maybe authentic might be a good word to include in our list. All right, I think I have time for about 2 more. Thank you, ma'am.
To echo your point about mentors not being the heroes in their stories, just to be vulnerable, and when you're mentoring, to talk about things you could have done differently.
Love that one. There's a great new book out by Dr. Julian Miravel, and he happens to be at my university, but that's not how I came in contact with him. But he writes about how disclosure builds intimacy in relationships. And so I think that's a great example of that principle. Yes?
Because we can't see it. Can you tell us what you just wrote?
Vulnerable. Except for the V looks like a U. And okay, so it looks perfect. My writing is beautiful. I'll take one more. If someone's really burning, you feel like we're really missing a critical thing. Thank you. No, sorry. This is good.
They don't give you the answer. So I think they help you figure it out. I think it's a lot like coaching, where I think sometimes you know what the answer is, but they help you get there.
Yeah, and that, if you sort of think about what we know about learning, that things that you tell people, one of my co-presenters always says to me, Mike, nothing you say in a presentation is all that important. And what he means by that is, what you say people are going to forget, but what they figure out for themselves, they'll carry with them. And so I think you're dead on in that way. Thank you. See, it was good that you raised your hand and added that in. All right. I'm going to very quickly give you a sense of what we're doing in the study. I'm not going to spend a long time on this. I'd be very grateful for any nominations that you'd be willing to contribute. We're still early on in the nomination process. We've contacted every law school, hoping they would forward it to their alumni associations, all the state bars, lots of different kinds of practices. So we have people who are on the listserv for nonprofit lawyers, clearly, because we have so many nonprofit lawyer nominees at this moment. People are on attorney general listservs. People are on prosecutor and public defender listservs. Because one of the things and even judges, because one of our concerns is we don't want to make an assumption that that a certain kind of lawyer is, can't get mentoring, for example, someone who hangs out their own shingles. So we're really trying to reach out in every way we can imagine. And basically anyone can nominate anyone. Because this is a university setting, you have to fill out a consent form. once you fill out the consent form, it jumps to the nomination form. And so that's on our website. If you Google what the best law mentors do, we are the first thing that comes up. And we haven't done any web optimizing. We're just lucky in that way. The way we're going to convert the nominees to subjects of the book is that we're asking each nominee for evidence that they have an extraordinary long-term effect on their mentees. And so what we received so far is, for the one that really stands out for me because I was reading them this morning, was like 15, 20 letters from public service lawyers in Wisconsin who have worked for a particular guy who's done public service his whole career. And the stories in there are as moving as what we heard today in the presentations about this guy. That someone said, I had an argument before the Supreme Court and I was terrified. I didn't want to do it. Why wouldn't he do it for me? And he said, no, you're going to do it. He arranged it to be mooted multiple times. He reviewed the briefs and gave the person feedback, but his message was always, you're the person who's going to be doing this because it's your case and you're capable of doing this, which is a really amazing and terrific message. So people kind of present that kind of evidence. And then we'll select, so this is from the standpoint of research. This is called a qualitative study. Some of you may know this term, some may you not. Quantitative is sort of like a survey-based study. A qualitative study, rather than sort of the researcher picks the categories and then surveys to say who says, how many people say A, B, C, or D. So quantitative research is very sort of, you can almost argue it's reductionistic because it says, here's what mentoring is to some degree or another just by the categories you come up with. Qualitative, we're going to do interviews with the mentors, their mentees, other observers, and then generate what we did for the best law teachers was thousands of pages of transcripts, and then look for the common themes that the mentees and the mentors say in response to our questions, and let those drive the categories that we're going to use for our chapters and for ultimately for the book. And so that's how we did the best law teacher thing. That's how we're going to do it for this study. There is software actually designed for qualitative research that will look for common sort of terms that are used. So one of the things that came out of the nominations we received so far, but haven't heard as much yet here, is humility being a common trait of the best mentors. But you know what? We found 27 law professors who are humble, and they're even more arrogant than lawyers. So I believe that we will find lawyers who are humble as well. But it has been a common theme among the, and I think you can hear a little echo of that in asking the mentees for sort of taking the mentees' input on something that's sort of a byproduct, I think, of humility. And so then once we do that, we'll look for the common themes. The themes will become, the big themes will be chapters, there'll be sub-themes, sub-themes, all the way down to eventually writing the book. And we'll draw on examples from our interviews and from our observations of mentoring interactions. So that's where we're headed with the project. I want to launch you into what you're doing. Next, I'm going to spend 30 seconds on what I'm passionate about, that I do believe that nothing we say is all that important. And so having people discover for themselves what they need to be doing to be effective as mentors. Not saying go off and mentor and let them flounder, but have them actively engage in a process that allows them to discover what they should be aspiring to as a mentor. I do believe that is the best way to get people to buy into doing kind of best practices mentoring. And then by and large, I also really believe, and I've seen evidence of this already in this conference, that you believe that collaboration between people produces a better product. And that is so driven by research. If you ever want to see the research on collaboration being a better teaching tool, all you have to do is Google Johnson & Johnson Cooperative Learning. And what you will find is, they're at the University of Minnesota, there are thousands of studies that show that people learn stuff better collaboratively than they learn working independently. So what I would like you to do in your small groups is try to come up with a training program to really actually do something concrete and specific. Maybe as a 1-hour CLE, I thought having some boundary, at least as a starting point. If you want to actually come up with a series of CLEs, great, you have plenty of time to work. I think that it should have a beginning and a middle and an end, so it should be structured with a plan. And one of the things that we heard a lot about today, and I was guessing we were going to hear a lot about it, is that there's a question of motivating the mentees and the mentors. And so it's useful for you to think about how your training program or your training session can motivate the mentees. And so what's going to happen is you're going to work in your small groups. You're divided alphabetically into 6 groups. And we're going to have each of the 6 groups basically have a representative stand up and present in like a minute or two. Here's our plan. Here's what we have in mind for doing it. Are there questions about what we're doing? Okay, we're going to break in a moment, but John will tell you how the groups will divide, I think.